Shodhanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Bharadhare Gopi Jana Balava Giri Bharadhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Vishnabad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Status Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Sri Sri Radha Radhanath Ki Sri Giri Govardhan Ki Sankirtan Yagya Ki Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 2. Daksha curses Lord Shiva, verses 11, 12, and 13. I believe 11 and 12 are not on the sheet, yeah? So I'll just read 11 and 12 and then we'll chant 13 together. Right, so 11. Esha me shishyatam prapto, yan me duhitur agrahit, panim vipragni mukhata, savitriya eva sadhuvat. So this is Daksha speaking in anger against Lord Shiva for not standing up, specifically that really, not standing up when his father-in-law Daksha came in. Everybody else stood up except Lord Brahma. Right, so translation. He has already accepted himself as my subordinate by marrying my daughter in the presence of fire and Brahmins. He has married my daughter who's equal to Gayatri and has pretended to be just like an honest person. And actually there's a very short purport here by Srila Prabhupada. Daksha's statement that Lord Shiva pretended to be an honest person means that Shiva was dishonest because in spite of accepting the position of Daksha's son-in-law, he was not respectful to Daksha. Dishonesty, this is how Daksha's taking it. Eva sadhuvat means, well, like an honest person. Sadhu, interesting. Sadhu, in a very literal sense, means an honest person. Of course, it has other meanings, like a saintly person, but the essence is an honest person. So 12, Grihitva mriga shavakshya pani markata lochana pratyuta na bivardar he vachap yakrita nochitam. And now he's already lost it, but now he's really losing it. He has eyes like a monkey's. Hare Krishna. Yet he has married my daughter, whose eyes are just like those of a deer cub. Nevertheless, he did not stand up to receive me, nor did he think it fit to welcome me with sweet words. Yes, okay, and 13. Lupta kriyaya shuchaye manine bina setave anichchan api adam balam shudrayevo shatim giram lupta kriyaya shuchaye manine bina setave anichchan apyadam balam. Shujayevo shatim giram. Lupta kriyaya shuchaye. Manine binna setave. Anichchanapyadambalam. Shudra yevo shatim giram. Lupta kriyaya shuchaye. Manine binna setave. Anichchanapyadambalam. Shurjayevo shatim giram. Lupta kriyaya. Not observing rules and regulations. Ashuchaye. Impure. Manine. Proud. Binasetave. Having broken all rules of civility. Anichchan. Not desiring. Api. Although. Adam. Handed over. Balam. My daughter. Shudraya. Unto a Sudra. Eva. As. Ashatim Giram. The message of the Vedas. Translation. I had no desire to give my daughter to this person who has broken all rules of civility. Because of not observing the required rules and regulations, he is impure. But I was obliged to hand over my daughter to him, just as one teaches the messages of the Vedas to a Shudra. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. A Shudra is forbidden to take lessons from the Vedas because a Shudra, due to his unclean habits, is not worthy to hear such instructions. This restriction, that unless one has acquired the Brahminical qualifications, one should not read the Vedic literatures, is like the restriction that a law student should not enter a law college unless he has been graduated from all lower grades. According to the estimation of Daksha, Shiva was unclean in habits and not worthy to have the hand of his daughter, Sati, who was so enlightened, beautiful, and chaste. The word used in this connection is Binna Setave, which refers to one who has broken all the regulations for good behavior by not following the Vedic principles. In other words, according to Daksha, the entire transaction of the marriage of his daughter with Shiva was not in order. Lupta kriya yashuchaye manine binase tave anichtanapyadam balam shudraye vo satim giram. I had no desire to give my daughter to this person who has broken all rules of civility. Because of not observing the required rules and regulations, he is impure. But I was obliged to hand over my daughter to him, just as one teaches the messages of the Vedas to a Shudra. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshdharne Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha paritanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So poor Daksha, he's really severely bewildered, extremely distressed even in different ways, you could say, and deeply envious of Lord Shiva. And it's really quite something, right? Because this is Satya Yuga. And generally we understand in Satya Yuga, everyone's pretty much pure. They say that in Satya Yuga there was only one ashram, varnashram, only one ashram. Generally, of course, there's brahmachari, grihasta, vanaprastha, then sannyas, sannyasis. But the sannyas ashram is divided into 4 parts. Bahudakuti Chak, Paramahansa, Paravrajacharya, and then Paramahansa. And the top one is Paramahansa, which of course literally means supremely swan-like person, just really such a special and wonderful person, elevated and just incredibly good qualities. The topmost person you can get. So it's said that in the Satya Yuga there was only one, sometimes it's said, only one ashram, and that was the Paramahansa ashram, the highest level of sannyas. Even people were married, but they were actually on that level. And then the Varnashram, the sort of structure was there, but the quality of the people was like Paramahansas. Although, there were the different ashrams, but they were all Paramahansas. Yeah, and then the Varnashram system really became like established at the end of Satyuga or beginning of Treta Yuga. So Daksha, he is regretting. He was obliged to hand over his daughter to him in marriage. Doesn't really say why. Just says, just as one teaches the messages of the Vedas to a Sudra, well, generally they won't do that. So I can't quite understand how he might have been obliged to, I must teach the messages of the Vedas to these Sudras. It's a little mysterious, because one would think that he would not have been obliged to. And even if there was some pressure or attempt to make him feel obliged to, that he would not have given into it. So therefore Prabhupada says at the end of the purport, in other words, according to Daksha, the entire transaction of the marriage of his daughter with Shiva was not in order, out of order. It was like adharma. It wasn't real, dharma. So when I first read through this, I thought, gosh, is he going to try to unmarry his daughter? Something like that. But she disconnects herself from him by self-immolating herself, a form of suicide. So, So it's really quite a situation. It's such a situation. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada focuses on this interesting point that the Vedas, it is forbidden to teach the Vedas to a Sudra. Now, first thing we should understand is that when the term Vedas is used here, it's referring to the four Vedas, is not referring to the Puranas, the Itihasas. It's referring to what in Vedic terms is called the Shruti, which is somewhat different from the parts that we study. We study the Itihasas, we study the Puranas. In certain forms, we study the Itihasas means really we study Bhagavad Gita. Itihasa means historical literature. And the two Itihasas, which are, commonly here on this level, in this universe, the two Itihasas are Ramayana and Mahabharata. And Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata. So in that sense, we study Itihasa. And, generally, I know devotees have translated Ramayana and Mahabharata. And actually, Hridayananda Maharaj right now is sort of in the later stages of a much more, what would you say, authentic, I don't know about authentic, but definitely scholarly version of Mahabharata. which will be available before too long, at least. There are others. I looked this morning in the bookcase there as you're going out on the right of the temple room, and I saw Ramayana, and it's Ramayana. It's about like this thick. It's not exactly Ramayana. I mean, it's a highly condensed version. But I was thinking, this is a bit misleading to say Ramayana. This is Ramayana, because it's not really Ramayana. But it's a condensed version, abbreviated, and it's got the main stories. So Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata, and so therefore it's in a certain technical sense, it's within the sort of purview of itihasa. And of course, as we study Bhagavad Gita, as we do, then from time to time, the different historical elements of Mahabharata are mentioned in order to just understand the background of Bhagavad Gita. So actually Bhagavad Gita is not exactly itihasa, because itihasa means history. In terms of the character of the book, it is, and even Prabhupada sometimes referred to it as Gita-upanishad. It's Upanishadic in sort of mode of philosophical presentation. Yeah. Gita-upanishad, although it's within the greatest itihasa, which is Mahabharata. And Purana, of course, Purana means ancient. These literatures, the itihasas and the Puranas, and there's a few others, some Dharma Shastras like Ayurveda and Dhanurveda, they are, anyway, they're Smriti, Dharma Shastras. And then itihasas and Puranas, they're the main part of the non-Shruti part of the overall Vedic literatures. Yeah. So the Vedic literatures, they're divided into Shruti and Smriti. Shruti meaning the four Vedas and their corollaries, which include the Upanishads. So they are the Shruti, and in the strictest sense of the term, they're strictly Vedic literatures, and that's how Prabhupada is using the term here. A Sudra is forbidden to take lessons from the Vedas, because a Sudra is unclean and is not worthy of hearing such literatures. So, the Ishopanishad, our Sri Ishopanishad, is part of the Shruti. And in a certain sense, some people would say, and definitely do say, that people like us should not read the Ishopanishad. But then the Smriti, as I mentioned, the historical, the itihasas, and the Puranas. Purana means ancient. Puranas are also historical. Of course, as we have been reading through, we've been seeing how it's historical. All these, this is historical, what we're reading right now. But the difference between the Puranas and the Itihasas is that the Itihasas, each one, there's Ramayana and there's Mahabharata. Each one is dealing with one specific story, the story of Lord Ram. That's Ramayana. Or in the Mahabharata is the story, really speaking, of the Pandavas. Whereas the Puranas, and we see it in Srimad Bhagavatam, which is also one of the Puranas, they are dealing with many different historical events and historical persons, different times and different places. And the Shruti and is they use a slightly different Sanskrit. It's a noticeably different Sanskrit from the Smriti Sanskrit. So therefore, among scholars at least, the Sanskrit of the four Vedas and their corollaries is called Vedic Sanskrit. And the Sanskrit of the Itihasas, the Puranas, is called classical Sanskrit. That's what they call it. And it's definitely different from the Vedic Sanskrit, so-called Vedic Sanskrit. So, I hope that's not confusing, but anyway, it's just interesting backgrounds. Seeing Srila Prabhupada says a Sudra here is forbidden to take lessons from the Vedas, because I think some of us here, at least myself, I would have struggled to be classified as a Sudra. I was definitely less than a Sudra, absolutely no doubt about it. Because Sudras, they're the laboring class, and they like working. I retired at the age of about 20, and I took a vow I was never going to work again, seriously, until I came to Krishna consciousness and I realized, and I specifically thought, actually, that, I'm not going to work again, but working for Krishna, this is really nice. As I was cleaning the toilets. I mean, I'm completely serious. While I was cleaning the toilets, which was the first ever service I did, other than some chanting, that's what I thought. I was in ecstasy cleaning the toilets. It was amazing. And I thought, wow, this is really something. So I vowed to never work again, but this is something different. So I'll work for Krishna. So now the thing is, the Sudra is forbidden, and we're all, there's one little sutra which Prabhupada refers to, Kalo Sudra Sambhava. In Kali Yuga, everyone's born a Sudra. Kalo Sudra Sambhava basically means in Kali Yuga everyone has the nature of a Sudra. And then there's another little sutra which goes Janmana Jayate Sudra. By birth, Janma, Jayate Sudra. By birth, everyone's a Sudra. Because little babies, they are really, they have no culture at all, literally. They can't even talk. And they just pass stool and urine anywhere and everywhere. And away they go and just Haribol. But by training, association training, people develop into the different Varanas. So now, Srila Jiva Goswami in Tattva Sandarbha, which is very interesting literature, really very interesting, he discusses the difference. I mean, it's amongst people who study the Vedas, it's extremely well known. We may not be so much aware of it, but he discusses the difference between the Shruti and the Smriti. That the different types of Sanskrit and that the difference of accessibility. And one way that he puts it is that the Smriti, and he's particularly referring, is not so much the Dharma Shastras, like Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, and there's various others, which are basically about different material skills. Like Dhanurveda is about military skill. Ayurveda is about medical skill. So they're sort of skills of different occupational groups. But the Itihasas and Puranas, they're really the classic Smriti Shastras. And he makes the point that they are more merciful, so therefore they can be approached by Sudras. And the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, although it appears in Shruti literatures, like it's quoted in, what's it called? What's the Kali? Anyway, in one Upanishad, Kali Santarana, I think, the Hare Krishna mantra is there. But it's not counted as a Shruti mantra, one of the mantras in that old type of Sanskrit, more complex form of Sanskrit. It's considered a Smriti mantra, which can be chanted by anyone, can be chanted by Sudras, and even people who are less than Sudras. That's us, by the way. And he makes the point, it's such an interesting point, that these mantras, and of course it includes the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, all these mantras are people. These mantras, they're not just sort of grammatical devices or linguistic devices or linguistic arrangements, statements, something like that. But all these mantras are persons. And like we know, Srila Prabhupada said on a number of occasions, and we just read it somewhere, that Prabhupada said that when you become advanced, it was in the Lilamrita. Some of you, a few of you must have been here, were here. And Prabhupada said that when you become, perfect in chanting, really, really advanced in chanting, then you will feel Krishna dancing on your tongue. You'll feel it, because he's actually dancing. The problem at the moment, we are too insensitive. So, being insensitive includes when another person's in distress, you're not able to really empathize or sympathize because you're too insensitive, which kind of has its roots in being too self-centered. Because when we get distressed, we usually become pretty sensitive to our distress. So a pure devotee, meaning that sort of pure devotee, feels Krishna dancing on his or her tongue and sees them. Yes. Because, and it's not like Krishna is dancing, in the same rhythm to the mantra, and the mantra is sort of like a different thing. The mantra is Krishna. Radha and Krishna are present, personally present, fully personally present, all of them. And we had a class the other day, a week or two ago, for the Russian leaders, about what Prabhupada said about chanting Hare Krishna. And we came across the point that, what was the point? Anyway, that was one of the points. That Krishna's present in the mantra. The mantra is Krishna. It's a form of Krishna. Therefore one has to be very respectful towards the mantra. Towards the mantra itself, one has to be respectful. But now Jiva Goswami makes the point that these smriti mantras, like the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, is not so sensitive. I mean, well, you could say sensitive, and that's in a certain sense. Is not so touchy about who chants the mantra. The Hare Krishna mantra welcomes being chanted by people who are less than Sudra, is happy to be. But Jiva Goswami says that the Shruti mantras, they become frightened when they're approached by low-class people. They become frightened and they run away, and they will not, they just won't deal with such people. They won't give people entrance to them. Even if people sort of move their mouths and in such ways as to produce the sounds, but the mantras are not there. They're not present because they won't deal with such people. And therefore our Gayatri mantras, which are very important mantras, extremely important mantras, and our first Gayatri, which is the classic Brahma Gayatri, Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha, etc., is, Jiva Goswami calls it the prototype of all the Shruti mantras. It's the root of all of those strict, very strict Vedic mantras which will not have unqualified people deal with them. That mantra, the first of our Gayatris, is, you don't get a more significant, strict Vedic mantra than that. And then, of course, there are the other ones that we chant. So, So we only give those mantras to when devotees get second initiation, because when devotees get second initiation, they should be, they're meant to be, and many of them are, qualified as Brahmins in terms of character and habit and the way they live. The term used here, lupta kriyaya ashuchaye. He particularly, and he says manine. So he refers to what he feels are disqualifications that Lord Shiva has. Which, anyway, that's daksha. But he feels that he's asuchaya, he's unclean, because he covers his body in the ashes of cremated bodies. Little does he know that he covers his body with the ashes of cremated pure Vaishnavas. So those ashes are pure. And when Sati, sort of cremates herself, Lord Shiva takes her ashes and puts her ashes on his body. And Daksha considers Sati to be pure. So the ashes of her pure body are pure. And Manine, proud, because he didn't stand up for Daksha. So normally these are disqualifications. These are characteristics of Sudras or people who are less than Sudra, that they just don't understand cleanliness. A classic one, they use the toilet and don't, what to speak of taking a bath of some sort, they don't even wash their hands. This is at best Sudra if they're extremely lucky. And Manine, proud. Yeah, so those Vedic mantras, Shruti mantras, they are not meant to be recited by people who possess those disqualifications. Because if a person is unclean, then, I don't know if you've ever been in such a situation, you haven't been able to take a bath in the morning. I remember several years ago, I flew on Egypt Air through Cairo to probably Russia or somewhere in Europe. And I went and used the lounge. It was I've been in so many of these lounges. It was the only one I've been in. It doesn't have showers. So you just physically can't take a shower. So I didn't take a shower till the afternoon. And you're trying to chant your rounds, but it's more difficult because the lack of cleanliness affects one's thinking processes. I mean, someone like Prabhupada Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they would get up, really early and just wash their hands and faces and take a bath after the sun has risen. But they're on a different level, and they would wash their hands and faces, at least, which helps. But people who are really unclean, one of the effects of the lack of cleanliness is the consciousness is just not able to enter into these transcendental mantras. Yeah, it's more difficult. It's just more difficult because of the lack of cleanliness which means the lack of a Brahminical quality. Yes. So as Prabhupada said, a Sudra is forbidden to take lessons from the Vedas because a Sudra, due to his unclean habits, is not worthy to hear such instructions. Yeah. So unless you've acquired the Brahminical qualifications, you shouldn't read the Vedic literatures, which could be considered the Ishopanishad would definitely falls into that category. But Prabhupada gave it to us. That was his mercy. So anyway, Daksha, he's in just a shocking state of consciousness, absolutely horrendous state of consciousness. And we, from this pastime, among other things, I mean, there are other things to learn too, but it seems to be the main lesson, is don't get offensive. Don't be offensive. Even you could say to anyone. I was there once, Prabhupada was giving class in Bhaktivedanta Manor, and Prabhupada was talking about how people are born in different families. I mean, like devotees are born in different families, and at a certain point they take to Krishna consciousness very easily because they were devotees in their previous lifetimes. Just sort of naturally comes to them. And Prabhupada said that, and Prabhupada, elsewhere said that some of the children born in our movement may have been demigods in their previous lifetimes. So in that class, Prabhupada said, so you must be careful how you deal with other devotees, because you don't know who you may be sitting next to. Right? And Prabhupada said, you never know. It might be Narada Muni. And you don't want to offend Narada Muni, but you don't want to offend any devotee. And this is a Brahminical quality of being inoffensive. Hare Krishna. Any comment or question? Mm-hmm.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. I just wanted to ask, is the difference in the two Sanskrits, is it more like in the quality of Sanskrit, like say Shakespearean English and English, or is it more in the alphabet itself?
It's more like grammatical. There's a somewhat different grammar.
Okay.
And they chant. There are Vedic rhythms for chanting. Yeah. And the Vedic Sanskrit may be slightly more sophisticated. It's probably more like the difference between, this, I don't know if it's an even usable example, but could possibly say British English and American English. There are differences. And you ask any Britisher who speaks British English well, and he'll definitely feel like that. The Americans won't care, but it may be more something like that. Yeah, there are differences in grammar. Yeah, there are definitely differences in grammar, and there are differences in spelling. Yeah, but I don't know if that's, but there are differences. So in a certain sense, at least, you could say like that. It's not like the difference between English and, like Pidgin English. In some of these places you get Pidgin English, New Guinea and places. It's based on English, and there are English words, but sure, it's a different language, really, yeah. Yeah, anyway, it's something like that. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. During the time of this incident of Sati's self-immolation, it was Sati Yuga. There shouldn't be any Sudras around. Is that true?
You know, it's the material world. You know, don't have too high expectations. But generally, people were high level. Generally, people were very high level. But deterioration definitely took place. So by the time Treta Yuga started, 25% of the qualification had been lost. Yeah. So, and Daksha, you know, generally he's not really a Sudra. Generally he's a something. Kshatriya, he's probably a Kshatriya, really. He's a Prajapati. So, you know, he's got many Vedic qualifications. Many Vedic qualifications to be one of Lord Brahma's sons at the beginning of the universe. It's amazing. But it's the material world. So disqualification is there also. Like even Lord Brahma got into difficulty a few times. Yeah. So, in other words, in such a yuga, if someone shows some temporary disqualification, it's not too surprising. Yeah, although generally they were of a very high class. Is that okay? Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh, I'm happy you were able to come.
I was hearing online while I was up in the beauty department, and then until I got to the stairs, I managed to.
Very good.
I'm trying to get into the routine to think I need to start a little bit earlier than I was looking for the forecast.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Hare Krishna. Sorry? Yes. Well, you can leave them anywhere, really. The room has been cleaned. So, I mean, they can just be left there for the time being. No harm. Yes, I've got my class in 20 minutes.